bond of friendship and support. But gaming is more than just a hobby for them. It's actually part of cutting-edge neurological rehab that helps engage the brain in new ways as part of their recovery. The film will premiere on HBO Max on July 10th, so be on the lookout. And now I will just show you the trailer that just dropped yesterday. And after that, I will show you one scene from the film that highlights some of that VR therapy I was talking about.
Esports competition is huge. $1 billion industry with millions of players.
Come on, you're stronger than that.
I will play a game from the night to the morning.
Oh, I got up.
I will keep playing that game until I win.
You walk from point A to point B, I roll from point A to point B. It doesn't make me any less of a person.
When we're trying to help someone recover from neurological injury, you need thousands of repetitions of movements.
We put together an esports team.
Logitech is announcing the first adaptive esports tournament.
We gotta put the work in for that.
When you come so close to death, it will make you look at life and time totally differently.
In my dream, I'm walking. That means that I'm not giving up. The biggest misconception that people have is that we're fragile.
I lost one identity, and the real me came out. It was a rebirth because I have become the person I was meant to be.
Thank you. Thank you. We're really excited. It's been such a journey to getting this film onto the big screen. And just a little preview, the next scene I'll show is, just to set it up, the quad gods are hanging out and they're talking about some of the neuropathic pain that they experience. They're sort of describing their pain, and that segues into a scene where you see Blake, who's one of the quad gods, using VR. And in VR therapy, he's looking at legs that are on a beach and moving around and using that simulation in order to help with his pain. And so I won't say more, I'll just let you watch it and you can see. Okay, great. And now I will bring out the quad gods. So welcome Richard Jacobs, Blake Hunt, Sergio Acevedo. Okay, you can go right next
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? How y'all doing?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
I'll come sit over here. Okay. So, we made a movie.
Right? It's crazy.
So I just want to ask you guys some questions, get you talking a little bit about yourselves, and then I'd love for the audience if you guys have some things you want to ask the quad gods or questions for us, for you to be able to do that at the end. Why don't we start with you guys just tell the audience a little bit about how the team got started.
The team got started, I guess, the way I just would see it. We all went through our, situations as far as our injuries. Each one of us have different situations as far as how we was injured and at the level, like certain level of injury. So we all came together in a place called the Ark at Mount Sinai Hospital. Well, I got introduced to the Ark through somebody named Dr. Riccobono, Angela Riccobono. She run this transitions group at Mount Sinai Hospital, and it helps to transition people from, inpatient, like back into the community, like coming from out of, dealing with your tragedy or whatever, to go back to the community. So I started to go to the transitions groups, and she told me about a group that was being put together that it was basically a group of guys that was gamers, not just guys, but a group of people that was gamers. And she found out that I was interested in gaming. So that's how I got introduced to the group.
Excuse me, sorry. Me personally, the part that you guys were watching where I'm doing like the nerve pain, I actually go to the Ark regularly because like I said, I got addicted to Percocets. Penny Marshall helped me get off of them. So for that, I kind of got an email from a friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh, they're having like tryouts for an esports gaming because everybody's got used to me playing video games and watching me." So that's how I got introduced to it personally. So from there, it kind of just blossomed into something. It's something really beautiful for us. Most of us are like brothers. We all known each other for years. This is just something that turned into something beautiful, I would say.
How about you, Serge?
Oh, well, the same was, I got the email too, from Angela Riccobono. And it was out there, and I was like, I can't wait to just go and find people that were into doing something that's way out of my league. So it was a big meeting of like 10, 15 people that showed up for the email, all in this little tiny lab where we met David Petrono, the doctor, and we met a whole bunch of other quadriplegics that were just into doing something that was out of their realms, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Serge, you had never gamed before, really, right?
I never gamed before. What I had was like sticks. So I would have a stick to write with, a stick to use a computer with, a stick to like do my art with. So it was just sticks for me. Mm-hmm. When I went to the lab, and I was like, wow. I met Chris Scott. He was using a quad stick, and I was like a sip and chin control. And I was like, I'm into that. I definitely want to get into it. Because it would just, I didn't realize how big internet and computer things were. I was just not into that. I didn't know about it. So it definitely opened a lot of doors for me, especially being, I can't have no functions of my arms. So it's like, all right, here's a good challenge for people that are in technology and somebody for me to at least open a door. That'd be,
Yeah.
That's what
Let's
got
talk
me
about how you
into it.
guys are gaming too, just for the audience. Like, what controllers are you using? Because you all use different controllers.
So, just for anybody in the audience that might not know exactly what it was that he was talking about when he said he used a quad stick is basically a specialized controller for somebody that's paralyzed from the neck down because they can't use their hands or their arms or anything like that. So it's basically a controller that's connected to like a rod, and you put it in your mouth. It have 3 different like blowholes on it where you can either blow into it or you sip on it like a straw. So each one of those, like if you blow on it, it might perform the function of the A button. Or if you sip on it like a straw, it might perform the function of the X button. Or, you might blow on the one that's all the way to the far right. Each one is a different button. Each performance or each motion that you do is a different button. So that's how he get a chance to play the game, because without it, he wouldn't be able to. And for me, personally, myself, I use something called the Astro C40. Now, the Astro C40 is close to a conventional controller. It's close to it. But because of the fact that I don't have 100% use of my hands and my fingers, the controller is specialized to where it's extremely sensitive, to where I don't have to use as much finger strength to get the button pressed or to, move to the left or move to the right. Also, I could customize it to where I could move one button from one place and put it somewhere else that might make it a little bit more comfortable for my hands to use it. So, at this moment right now, that controller is the one that I generally use right now. But other than that, I would have to use the Microsoft Adaptive Controller, which is like, it looks like a big Nintendo controller, like the first Nintendo from back in the days that only had 2 buttons on it. So it looked like a really big version of that, but it have all these extra peripheral buttons that you could connect to it. And you could basically place those buttons wherever you see fit that could work for you. So let's say, my arm is strong and I could press the buttons with my elbow here. So I could actually place one here, and that could be a button for me that I'll press here. Or in Sergio's case, you see he got the head
I'm
mount
not
there.
pressing any buttons.
Well, come on, we know that. In Sergio's case, you see how his head mount is. So he could actually use his head to press the buttons if he wanted to. But as you can see, he ain't trying to press no buttons. So I'll leave that up to him.
I use a combination of the Xbox Adaptive along with the Warfighter joystick, depending on what games I'm playing. Like if we're playing Rocket League, it's normally the Xbox Adaptive Controller with the Warfighter joystick. If for whatever reason we're playing like a first-person shooter or something, it's normally keyboard and mouse. I use a TKL keyboard just so I can keep all my keys to one side of the keyboard. So that's predominantly what I use. Xbox the adaptive controller is great for the fact of, like Richard said, if you can combine them with other keys, and you can have all your keys literally mounted anywhere you want them. It's almost like the equivalent of what they do with adaptive driving, when you can put a signal on your door arrest or something like that, so you can signal left or right. But that's predominantly what I'm using right now.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about less the technical side, but also just what does gaming mean to you and the team mean to you? Like what has been the benefit, big picture here.
For me, the team for me means, having, it's like a sense of belonging, right? So for me personally, when I went through my injury, before my injury, everything that I did, I was such a physical person. Like, I used to work for Dish Network, putting up satellite TV installation. And from there, I was working Con Edison. So everything that I did throughout my whole life was physical, hands-on work. So after my injury, that part of me, I kind of lost it in the beginning, and mentally, I guess it was just a mental thing that I had lost it, because it took me some time to realize that there are things that I used to do that I still can do, but I would just have to find a different way to do it. So in the beginning, it was just the fact that it was just all gone. That's how I saw it. So that devastated me. I'm not even gonna lie, I was in a really deep depression, and being introduced to the team and coming into the room, I remember the first day I came into the room and I saw everybody else there. Immediately when I came into the room, I felt as if I'm finally amongst people that could understand what I might be dealing with. They feel how I might feel. So being a part of the team, for me personally, I could say is almost like a lifesaver.
Oh, sorry, I just didn't want to cut you off.
No, I'm
yeah,
good.
gaming for me, it kind of, because I got hurt at a young age, so I took chess as a way to take my anger out on people, because I was very much a sports person. I got hurt playing football, so for me, it was one of those ways of channeling, my frustration, because I couldn't really play video games anymore, and that's kind of like what I grew up on. So when we started the team, like I said, we all knew each other before we went on the team, but it became much more, like we're a lot closer now than we probably were before. More so because now we actually are always together all the time. Like we're always talking about something. But like brothers and sisters, like they get on your nerves sometimes, but you still love them. So like Richard said, it definitely, gaming for me actually like kept me from wanting to kill myself, I would say, because being a jock is kind of a hard thing to go from being able to take care of yourself to not being able to do anything. So I definitely think like it helped me out a lot, and I'm appreciative. Unfortunately, one of our teammates isn't here, and without him, none of this would be possible. But yeah, I think gaming for everybody, if you use it in the right way, it could save your life. So without this team, I'd probably be doing something crazy.
And Sergio, before Sergio gives his answer, I just want to point out that he created the Quad Gods logo. He's also an artist. And so he painted this logo. You can tell them with your mouth stick, yeah.
I don't know. Well, the logo was just, I drew a bunch of logos. It wasn't just this one. It was like a circle. I didn't know how to. So I just kept looking through a whole bunch of logos. I kept asking these guys, what do you want on it? What do you think we should do it? And the wings came out, the shield came out. It's just, it just popped. It was like, that's it. I think we got something. And then I just asked these guys, what do you want on it? Like, can you make it say Quad Gods on it? We don't want to put, somebody wanted to put a wheelchair on it. I was like, I don't want to put a wheelchair on it. I want somebody to like walk around and be like, what's the Quad Gods? And then look up and be like, oh man, it's a bunch of dudes playing adaptive sports, but on the computer. And I was like, I think that was a surprise. And the wings we just added on for Chris Scott, who passed away. It was one of our founding members that was there that sent the email out. I think he had part of sending out that email. Mm-hmm. And the trade, paid tribute to Chris was putting on the wings, and to pay tribute to us who were like, we know that you're hurt. You come to the Quad Gods, we're going to protect you with a shield. And I don't know, However, I guess you guys see it. I don't know what you see when you see a logo like that. So it's like,
The one thing I will say, individually, we all are great. Like Sergio is a painter with his mouth, so is Nairi. She is our only current female member, and they are both amazing artists. Like we have one of our teammates likes to cook, so so we all do stuff individually. It makes us great, but together, we allow that to shine through. So, and I think our message overall is just, we want to show people that although we're disabled, we're able to do amazing things, and because there are a lot of disabled people out there that are just as amazing as the rest of us, and they don't have the platform that we have, and it's our job to really show, like, just because you're disabled, that doesn't mean you can't do things that you want to do.
That's great. I'm going to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have questions for them? We have about 20 minutes, or I can keep asking questions of them.
Thank you for sharing everything that you have. I know, obviously, it's hitting you all as you share this today in different ways. I loved hearing about how you shared about how your life has kind of changed with this as far as your group and everything. Outside of gaming, outside of the brotherhood and the single sisterhood that you have with the people in the Quad Gods, how has your life changed just from being a member of a group like this, outside of like just the people, like that immediate Quad God circle?
Well, for me,
Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean it.
No, go.
Well, for me, I get to do things that I actually like to do, which is like helping people who are not in a position to get certain things, to do certain things for themselves. I'm very much into I was always into feeding the homeless and things like that growing up. So now I get to give back to our community because that's what's important to me. I find that to be very rewarding outside of gaming personally. So in a weird way, I take more pleasure out of that than I actually do out of gaming right now at this point. That's just me personally.
As far as I go, my life being, after my injury and me and the team, my life changed because, or I would say that it kind of gave me a sense of like significance again. Like I felt as if, after my injury where, excuse me, that I wasn't, I didn't have no significance as before my injury. I'm the oldest member of my family, so I was the provider, and after my injury, all of that, I felt like I didn't have that sense no more, that I wasn't able to do that. So, excuse me. When I met the team and we all came together to do things and try to make things happen, and there were certain aspects of the team and things that was going on where it kind of showed me that, I still was able to do certain things and make certain things happen, and it showed me that I was still significant in this world.
And you've been more recently doing they're doing outreach work at the hospital. So we've been meeting with people that are in that transitional stage and finding and identifying people that are really into gaming and then helping them get controllers. So you guys can talk about that a little bit. It's really...
So one of our newer members, his name is Andy. He's just one of many young kids or young men. He's a young man. Sorry. That we've helped up until this point. you know, when he first got hurt, you know, when you first get hurt, everything seems real minuscule compared to like what you're gonna be going through, because everything is so controlled and you're in a controlled environment when you're at Mount Sinai, because everything is structured in a way in which you feel safe. So then when, you know, it's time for you to go home into the community, that's when you really learn a lot about yourself. But Andy, he got gaming equipment. We got it for him, and he's been playing games since. He's another high-level injury like Sergio. And he just placed second place in one of the tournaments that was just held not too long ago.
Finals.
Yeah, so you know we're helping as many people as we can. I just helped one of my brothers, who I was in a nursing home with for like 5 years. He was another one I used to like do everything with like a stick and like a keyboard. So I finally helped him get like a quad stick. And like the other day, he called me like, "Oh my God, like I can't get off 2K." I'm like, so I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's great." He's like, "Yeah, my home attendant's been taking my quad stick away." So you know, like it's just, you know, it's stuff like that, which has been very rewarding, and we've just started doing it more. I think we're going to be working with NYU at some point. We're currently working with Mount Sinai right now exclusively, but
And Bellevue Hospital just got added to the list too.
oh, okay. See, I didn't know that. So you know, I think hopefully by the time it's all said and done, you know, we can get gaming into these schools and like keep the children entertained and give them something positive to look forward to, as opposed to being out in the streets. Because I was in Atlanta, and that was one of their main points when I was out there, is that they're putting gaming into the school curriculums for the young children. So if we can get that in New York City, I think it'll be amazing. So, you know, not only for able-bodied children, but for the disabled children out there that don't feel like they can compete physically with able-bodied children. Because gaming is the one field where we're all leveled. And we are the standing testament to that, because we really, really kick ass.
Sergio, how about for you? How has
Oh man, it's so wonderful to like see people that are out there, and I'm able to communicate with them through a quad stick and through gaming. I'm playing with my nephew that I never thought I'd be able to like play. Like I'm like, yeah, I'm stuck in a wheelchair. How can I play with you? And I was like, this gaming and computers just opened up a whole new world for me. It's like I can look at art in a whole different way, like different views of it. It's like, I don't know, it opened so many doors for me. I'm just excited to see what else can we bring to the table, and who's gonna join this bandwagon, man. I can't wait to like everyone have a Quad God shirt. Big billboard everywhere.
Oh God, please, no billboard.
All over the world. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great.
a subtle plug for their merch? Their merch is on sale now, so you can go buy all the Quad God swag that you want as well.
Get a shirt, man. I'm just excited what technology is going to bring for, you know, especially like a high-level quad like me really doesn't have much to mess around with except sticks. Like like I'm saying, I taught myself how to spell my name with the stick, and that's all I really had to like forget that I'm in this chair and I got to deal with stuff that doesn't come in the regular world anymore. So to know that technology is here and I'm able to interact and be part of something that you never thought the person on the other screen is doing, or is like, wow, this person's laying down and actually working with, using an eye tracker or a sip and puff, or, some kind of technology that's going to be able for for everybody to use, no matter what,
Yeah.
how messed
No.
up you may be, I guess.
It was, believe it or not, hopefully I didn't cut you off, Sergio. Believe it or not, I just want to, first of all, apologize for getting emotional, right? But it's just, it's just, thank you. It's, it just, I guess that would show y'all just how much this means to me. I literally was in my bathroom for like 15 minutes looking in the mirror telling myself I wasn't going to do that. Like, all right, we ain't going to do it, not today. We gonna hold them all in until we leave the building. You see, obviously it didn't work. So whenever I think about the team and, how much they mean to me and how much all of this have done for me, see, it's happening again. So, it just shows you how much this really means to me.
Got your back, Richard. Got your back, man.
Thank you.
I am not. Oh,
Are there any other questions? We have like 10-ish minutes if anybody else wanted to.
Yeah, sure. I think that, is this working? Yeah. Effective, accessible pain management through VR is something that I'm surprised not more people are talking about. And in VR content creation, one thing we don't like to talk about is the so-called legs problem, where if I have the use of my legs and I look down, I generally don't see them because it's just too hard with most equipment to get that working properly. And so to see you invert that, it really opens up a whole new realm of interest. And I guess my question is, when you're having casual conversation with friends, family, people on the street, and you talk about this whole new vista of opportunity for moving us forward collectively, evolutionary, that the response I usually get is like, that's kind of interesting, but then nothing comes of it. So I'm always looking for these kinds of opportunities where we're doing something. And so then the question is, what's next? Do you get interest from other people saying like, oh, how can I help? Or where can I find some? Where can I go get that?
Well, I was actually, it's funny that you would ask that. I was actually asked to be a part of a panel where they're going to be diving into the whole nerve pain because on my journey from being addicted to Percocets to other ways of pain management. I'm at a point now where I do something which is called tracking, where I'm like right now I'm physically in pain, right? I can feel it, my body's responding to it, but I've learned to track to the point where I can get it under control, where I'm not having pain attacks. Really, tracking is just understanding that the pain that you're in is not real. And when you start to pay attention to it, it actually goes away. Because what happens with most nerve pain is that you try to ignore it, right? And it intensifies because it wants to be heard. So then you take pills, the pills dumb down, your nerve endings for a little while, but then what happens? Like a baby, it comes back. So I've learned to ignore it. Or if it gets to a point where I can't ignore it, to track it. And tracking is what helps it go away. I've learned all of that through Mount Sinai, though, because I'm at a point now where I can tell you what causes my nerve pain, how to make, water sounds make my nerve pain go away for a while. I guess you could say a guru of nerve pain. But I'm waiting to hear back because I know that was a thing, and I think it's from, I can't remember what state it was, but it's on the West Coast. So I'm going to be one of the panel members of that at some point. So hopefully I can help them, figure out a way to help other people with nerve pain.
Good going.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to ask questions in the audience? Anyone? No, I can't tell if there's hands. Okay. Well, I guess I just.
Oh, no, she was going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see. Go ahead.
Hello to everybody in the room, and thank you so much for sharing your stories. I work with Twice Exceptional community, and I was wondering if you all know about the Twice Exceptional community and what that means.
No.
So I think there's probably a lot in your community as well. Research-wise, the Twice Exceptional community means that we have a high IQ and also a learning challenge.
Okay.
And so I think that what you all are doing is really special for us, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you.
And for everyone else here, please look into it as well.
Thank you. Twice Exceptional community?
Yeah, the Twice Exceptional community. It's generally, a lot of times people will only see the negative and the learning challenge that they have or the physical challenge that they have, and their highs aren't shown to them. So they tend to have some low self-esteem and stuff. And in the school system, we're generally teaching to the middle of the road. So if you sit on either end, you really don't get serviced.
Okay.
And immersive technology, I think, is going to be one of the big answers to our community. And I think you all are doing it already.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. I think they were implementing like dancing for that because, okay, I really didn't want to have to say this, but I do tap dancing. So it's adaptive, where I'm working with coordinated dancing with like Rockettes, Former, and Current. So like my gloves are like adaptive, but they're gonna be putting dancing into the schools also. And I was actually talking to a couple of people about ways to make it more immersed for people that are disabled. So New York is going in the right direction. They're trying to make everything all-inclusive, which I think is important. So it's only a matter of time before we can get to a point where everybody's actively participating or doing something that they actually like.
Yeah, there's a philosopher, Dabrowski, that has a theory called positive disintegration, where our community definitely takes one step back in our life to take 2 steps forward, which I think will be very relevant to your group as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else? I had one last question for them, if not.
What do you guys play?
There we go.
I actually play a whole range of games. I'm an all-around gamer. I've been playing games since I was like 5 years old, regular Nintendo, 8-bit, Super Mario, little dot for a head. So like I play all different types of games. I play Rocket League, Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid, Fall Guys. There's a bunch of different things that I play. As far as tournament, like competitive games, I really participate in the Rocket League tournaments. Like each one of us specializes in something different.
I currently, when I'm not beating on my nephew, I currently do a lot of Call of Duty Mobile right now when I'm not playing like Fortnite or whatever, or training or playing tournaments in Rocket League, because I've become exceptionally good at Call of Duty Mobile. So that's my game of choice. But if I'm just playing for fun, it's normally Mario Kart or something like that. Because that's the only game my nephew wants to challenge me in. So.
For me, I don't know. I guess after that film, definitely going to do a lot more practicing in Rocket League.
Oh, God.
Oh, you like FIFA too, though?
Yeah, I need redemption, man.
Yes, Serge is a big FIFA player.
And playing Fortnite, Call of Duty, anything to get out there, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, Richard and Sergio were teammates in the semifinals for an adaptive Rocket League tournament. So that's in the film. They made it to the semifinals.
Yeah, that was a proud moment right there. Yeah, that was definitely a proud moment. Even stuff like that, even those small accomplishments, like even though it's just a video game, just the winning and being able to get to a certain level and even be able to just play the game at all, period. When you was at a point where you couldn't do it at all, there's anything that you really couldn't do, the more you learn and the more you get to do, the more accomplished you feel, which kind of helps to raise your self-esteem and your confidence in yourself, which also gives you the ability, to be able to go back into the world. Because without it, without that self-esteem and that confidence, it will lead you to isolation. You won't go back out. You will stay indoors. You'll always seem inferior. You won't want to be around people that you consider to be normal. So it's important to be able to find a group of people, or not even just a group of people, but anybody that could, keep you from falling into that space.
Support is important. We have a strong support group anyway. We got everyone from the quad mother to the quad father to Jess, Charles. Like we're all very like tight knit, but it's just like with any family though, you need like a strong support system. So, and that's kind of our motto. So once you guys see the documentary, you'll just see what we're saying. Like, we are dark humored a lot. So if you feel like you want to laugh, just go ahead. Because trust me, we were laughing when we were doing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but we're it's just that's just how we are.
Yeah, so everyone please check out the film. It'll be at 9 p.m. on July 10th. It's going live on Max and on HBO. And yeah, we're all going to be around. So if you guys want to come up, we encourage you to hang out and ask questions and get to know these guys. They're amazing.
Yeah. It was one other thing, like when he was saying about, us all being one big family now, that's exactly true. Like, even through disagreements or whatever, we come together so tight from everything that we went through, like we seen each other go through painful times, go through happy times, have to, wish each other well. Somebody might end up in the hospital and now we all worried about that person. So it really have become like a really tight-knit family. Like, I just got a bunch of brothers from a bunch of different mothers now. So, you know what I mean? It's always a good look, man.
Appreciate you guys for having us, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank y'all, too.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Let's try that again. So hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Grace, Knight Chair in Interactive Media and MFA Director at the University of Miami, and one of this year's festival curators. Next up, we're in for a real treat. The panel featuring Jesse Schell, CEO of Schell Games, will include a variety of really engaging topics, mainly focused on media and technology, and featuring a lively conversation about AI and the future of transformational games. They're going to explore rapid advances in artificial intelligence and how they're reshaping not only the gaming industry, but also education and society at large. So in short, imagine a future where games become even more immersive, adaptive, and impactful, all thanks to AI.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this today. The Games for Change folks said, hey, can you come and talk about something smart? And I said, well, the only thing I can think right now is important to talk about is AI. And I don't think I know enough about it myself to do it, so I thought, why don't we get three of the smartest people I know to come out here and talk about it with us. So if you are ready, let me tell you, our first panelist worked at PBS Kids for 10 years on content and then said, you know what, I need to go and get a PhD. So then they went and got a PhD from Northwestern in Media Technology and Society. And specifically with a thesis focusing on how do children use voice assistants like Alexa and Siri, and how do they think about that. And now is back at PBS as the head of learning and research at PBS Kids and is working on AI projects. Our first guest, Sylvia Lovato. All right. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, so who else are we going to have? After this, we have someone who is Associate Professor of Media Design here at Parsons and founded the Pet Lab, is a co-author of the book Games, Design, and Play, is currently doing AI projects involving large language models, and is one of the most creative game designers I know, Colleen Macklin. All right. And then finally, we have somebody who has been in the game industry a long time, has worked at Sony, has worked at THQ, has worked at Ubisoft, has worked at Nintendo, was the editor-in-chief of Game Developer Magazine, and was the senior advisor for digital media for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. This guy cannot hold down a job. Currently, he's the founder of Level Up Games, Mark DeLaura. All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us to talk about this today. Obviously, so much has been happening in the world of AI in even just the last year, even just the last couple months. There is an awful lot to talk about. In order to level the playing field, though, to get everybody on the same page, I want to show a brief video of where things are right now when it comes to AI and education.
OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this form.
Hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC?
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse, can you identify which side is the opposite side to angle alpha?
Okay, well, I mean, you told me earlier that this was the adjacent side, and I know that's the hypotenuse, so I'm guessing that this side, BC, is the opposite side.
Great deduction. That's absolutely correct. Now that you've identified all the sides relative to angle alpha, do you remember the formula for finding the sine of an angle in a right triangle?
Yeah, I know that the sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse.
Perfect. That's absolutely right. Now, can you apply that formula to find sine alpha in the triangle using the lengths of the sides that we've identified?
Okay, so, I mean, you told me that 7, this side BC, is the opposite side. And then you said that the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that would be this side AB, which is 25. So would the answer be 7 over 25?
Excellent work. That's correct. Sine alpha equals 7 over 25. You did a great job identifying the sides and using the sine formula. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
All right. So that's not science fiction. That's not 5 years in the future. That's where we are right now. That's what computers are able to do right now. So what do you all notice about that? Sylvia, what do you notice about, what do you think is striking about that video?
So the main thing that strikes me about that video is how human-like the tutor sounds and how good it was at following a pretty ambiguous prompt with like just nudging him in the right direction, right? You're not saying like, don't give him the answer, just nudge him in the right direction. That's not something that you would see in a piece of code, like something we would tell a computer before. So it's getting really good at ambiguity.
Yeah, the ambiguity and the emotion in it, I found startling. I was also surprised at its ability to just be aware of the pen strokes and to see where all of that was. Mark, Colleen, you have any thoughts on what you see there?
I mean, I guess I wish I had that when I was taking trigonometry. But yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting to me and something that people have commented on already, and I guess this is GPT-4o,
yes.
Yeah, is how human it sounds when it's processing. Like,
yeah.
Can you identify? You know, it's like pretty incredible, actually, from a sort of text-to-voice perspective.
Yeah, so if this is what's possible now, do you have thoughts about like what is likely to become possible in the next few years with this?
God. I mean, I would imagine, so the interesting thing is that as an educator thinking through this, that this kind of ambiguous problem set would be, you know, even more possible looking into the future. I mean, I guess the one thing that the AI can't do is tell you why you should care about the hypotenuse of the triangle, right? And like in what context, but I wonder if that might be somewhere we could, you know, kind of head. Or if we, you know, obviously we'll still hopefully need educators, since that's how I make my bread and butter. And, you know, educators just to be able to contextualize and say, well, why should you care, or to have more critical perspective.
I think you just said a great keyword there, which is context. Like in my research that you mentioned earlier, one big problem that the AI of 5 or 6 years ago had was dealing with, you know, students, young children, asking questions where they didn't do a great job contextualizing, and the AI was helpless. And I think this awareness of what's going on around and the situation that the asker is in is like promising, like new and exciting to see develop.
Yeah. I think that's what struck me watching this, outside of the fact that, like, at first I was just like, I want this for every student everywhere right now. Like, we need a 1 LLM per child sort of thing. but we're not ready. I think what struck me was how tactical that was. It's like, it was amazing, but it was very much like, I'm going to help you solve this problem. What I want is, I want that tactical part. I also want the strategic part. You know what? You're going to guide me from here to the next thing I need to know for the next kind of problem, or you're going to help scaffold me from the stuff that I didn't understand from the previous problem. And like that's what teachers are great at. So we still need teachers, but this tactical stuff is mind-blowing.
I think there's a huge question about how this is going to change things for teachers. There's been a lot of focus with AI on, wow, here's the things maybe we can't do anymore, right? The whole question of essay writing has now become very different, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about how can we police and make sure that the students are writing their own essays, and it kind of makes everybody take a step back and say, well, wait, how can and should this work? Yeah, does anybody have thoughts about, here are the things that just aren't going to fly in education anymore once this technology is ubiquitous?
I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, here at the New School, you know, I teach a lecture class, and last semester a student had an essay written by AI and presented it as their own writing. And, you know, it was pretty apparent. It was pretty easy to tell. You know, and clearly that's not going to be as easy moving into the future. But then the kicker is that the student wrote the apology email with AI too. And I get kudos to the student for their abilities to do that. But I do think that, you know, as educators, we're gonna have to be responsive and flexible. We're gonna have to be constantly reviewing and analyzing, like, what does learning mean? Like, what does it mean to be able to write a great essay? How do we kind of engage students in this in a way where they don't want to use the tools, or where the tools just won't do it for them, right?
Yeah, it really is making us all take a step back and say, well, wait, though, what is important? What do we need to keep? What can we let go of? What can we keep? And it's not easy questions. And Mark, the thing you talked about with the idea of, you know, a digital tutor for every student. You know, Colleen, you brought this question of, is this going to replace teachers?
Right.
And I guess you could imagine a world, maybe, where that happens. That sounds weird and dangerous. But we all know every teacher, no teacher has enough time ever, right? And the idea of a teacher who's got this army of assistants who can report back about what's up with the students, maybe that's how this works. I don't, it's hard to imagine.
It's a teacher assistant army of AI bots helping
Yeah.
them out. That's what you want, is like, you want them to be able to help you get information. But
Yeah.
what I wonder, talking about the essay, I keep kind of rolling back to what the purpose is of an essay. The essay is kind of an artifact of the learning process, right? You don't really care if they write an essay, you care if they learn the material. So how do we measure the learning of the material, not the fact that somebody turned in a paper? Do we need to shift the way that we're teaching? How do we solve this problem?
I think communication skills and the ability to write the essay has traditionally also been important. So maybe that, you know, AI can be a partner in helping us write clearly and concisely, and but with still whatever the writing is trying to communicate that you've learned should be your own. It's really hard to pull them apart, though.
Yeah, this idea of AI as creative partner for everyone in everything, I mean, this may become completely normal, right? Some people talk about the generations being defined by technologies, right? The boomers were the first with TV, Gen X with computers, millennials had the internet, Gen Z, social media. Maybe this new generation, Generation Alpha, they're the ones who grew up with AI, and that is what defines them, because they know how to deal with it. But let's step away from education, because we're not just talking about education here. We're trying to talk about how does this affect educational transformational games. So Mark, do you have thoughts about, in terms of, you know, you've watched the game industry evolve over time, the way games are developed. Do you have thoughts about what are the effects when this technology gets like properly integrated with games and game development? How do you think that's going to change the player experience?
Yeah, the first thing that always jumps to my mind, of course, is like what people are going to do with production, because that's the low-hanging fruit, right? But I think what I get excited about is the the side effect of that, which is it's so hard to make learning games as a career because it's difficult to make profits, difficult to make revenue. Making games is hard. Making fun educational games is hard plus hard plus hard. But if I can utilize AI, I can take more shots because I have an increased production capacity. I can try things that are more risky because maybe the AI is going to be a collaborator for me. And I can try to create things that are more dynamic for the player experience. So I'm going to use an LLM during the course of the game to help guide you through a math problem or whatever as part of a fun game-like experience. Like, that was never possible before. You could never have a free-flowing conversation outside of like the tree branching sort of RPG structure. That was the extent of your conversation. So how does that change the player experience if you can have a free-flowing conversation? What does it add? What does it subtract? Like, what does it detract from? It's super interesting to just, I'm excited to see what people create and people in this room.
Yeah, I think the whole question, I mean, so when we see the effect it's going to have on education, definitely. At the same time, we know there are going to be things happening in the entertainment space. Like, I've been trying to rack my brains trying to figure out where will the changes in the entertainment space happen first, where AI gets integrated in and really starts to take hold in terms of what genres. And I don't know. I struggle with it. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about where they think some of the low-hanging fruit in the entertainment space is going to be.
I don't like it, but I think, probably writing, at least in terms of flavor dialogue and NPC dialogue. I mean, obviously, I think it was Epic released a tool set for that. And Ubisoft, thank you. I get them mixed up, I don't know why. But definitely in my work with LLMs, it's very clear that writing is a low-hanging fruit there. At the same time, the writing isn't that compelling, right? So maybe there's an opportunity for, human writers to get weird again, maybe to, kind of do what these systems can't do. So, I don't know, to every technology, right? There's like the dark side and the light side. And
yeah, we talked about photography earlier and how when photography showed up, portrait painters were frustrated because like, oh, this is taking our jobs. And it did take some portrait painting jobs. Not all of them, but definitely some people had to kind of do something different. The longer term effect on art was suddenly the artists were like, well, if this isn't about reproducing reality, what can we do that the machine can't do? And we saw this massive blossoming in the nature of art. And so it's an interesting question. Will this cause some kind of interesting blossoming in the nature of writing for games? I guess we'll have to see. And then when it all comes together, like when we have for us in the educational game space, we're going to see these weird advances in the educational side of things, and then these advances in the game side of things, and how that comes together it's almost hard to imagine.
Oh, sorry.
You go ahead.
No, I want you go.
I was just thinking about how games are able to assess in learning, because games are great at tracking everything the player is doing. And if the AI has access to that and is aware of where the player is in their progress because of the actions that they have taken in the game prior, that might be a really interesting combination of being able to react to that with some data about that specific player.
Yeah, boy, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just the ability to kind of use that data and the customization feels like that's going to be such a trend. I mean, we've already seen that as a powerful trend in games in general. People now expect, like, of course I can customize my avatar. Of course I can customize the way the level of difficulty in the game. And of course, you look at that AI stuff, it's going to be, okay, I'm trying to customize the learning so it meets you where you are. So that seems like that's a big part of it. Oh, one thing I should mention, near the end, we'll probably have time for questions. The way I prefer to do it is if you've got a question, email it in. I've got an email up there on the board, and I'll pick some out and read those that way. So feel free to do that. So as we think about like what's going to change, where's it going to change, how's it going to change, Does anybody have thoughts on what ages of players and students are likely to be most impacted by this? Is it gonna be about adults and adult training? Is it gonna be teenagers? Is it gonna be preschoolers? Like who's likely to who's this gonna impact the most? Sylvia, what do you think?
I think it will impact everyone differently, but I don't know that there will be one age. I can speak a little bit about the age that I work with, which is young children ages 2 to 8. I think that there is increased need for transparency and for guiding kids when they're interacting with a system like that. I think that's super important to help them understand what that is, that it's not a human, and it may be difficult to do. So we'll have, in my own research, I found that young kids obviously tend to think that the conversational agent is a person, that it's alive, versus older kids already understanding a little bit better that it's not, and like having expectations, affective expectations that the AI will react to them with the way a human would. And that's not always, AI so far has not been great at affective reactions. So maybe that's something that's developing, and we'll see.
Well, it's an interesting question. You talk about the young kids who think of it as real, think of it as this is a real thinking, emotional thing that I'm talking to. If it really does get good enough, that'll be a big, weird change. And it's hard to look at that and say, is that parts of that sound really scary, right? If they are acting like this is a real person and they have, emotional attachment to it, when we know it's not, that sounds potentially problematic. But at the same time, there's power in it.
I agree with the problematic part and the need for guidelines and us all to agree on what's a good practice there.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like one of the challenges is going to be looming up at us, because we can think all day about here's what we think this is for, but if kids fall in love with it, okay, suddenly this is a problem that we have to address and that we have to solve. So I know one thing that we all think about, anybody making educational games, it's not easy to make money at that, right? Unless it is anybody like, oh no, it's easy. Raise your hand. Piece of cake. We're raking it in. Okay. Oh, well, all right. We'll talk later. That's good. Will this change? Will this make it easier, harder for this to be a business? Mark, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's probably easier, harder. Yeah.
Well, so what parts of it make it easier?
Yeah, there's just a lot of components. Like you said, there's good things and bad things, right? So there's, in terms of production, I think the low-hanging fruit, as you keep saying that, is the programming assistant, using an LLM as a programming assistant. Who in here is coders? Coders. How many of you are using a Copilot or something like that? Yeah, right?
About half-ish, something like that, yeah?
Yeah, why would you not, almost, is how I feel about it now. It feels like a fancy version of like the IntelliSense that tells you, or you're going to use this variable, oh, here's this thing from the manual. The LLM jumps in and says, oh, it looks like you're adding 2 to X. Maybe you're going to add 2 to Y and 2 to Z next. I'll just fill that in for you. Thank you. So from the production perspective, there are a bunch of interesting components that make it easier.
Right, so you're saying now a smaller team can do more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going like this to the ethical considerations, so don't ignore ethical considerations.
Yeah.
Make sure you're comfortable with how your LLM was trained. Try to use one that was ethically trained, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's in an environment in which we're all trying to figure out how to make educational games. I hope you're all trying to figure out how to make educational games and make enough that you're able to be sustainable. The idea that you could make them a little more cheaply with maybe the same amount of production complexity makes me very happy.
Okay. Well, and then what are your thoughts on the market? Because I think something all of us know. I had a couple of meetings with people where they brought this up this morning, talking about, so hard to sell into schools. Schools you'd think would be the ones most likely to buy educational game content. And often they're like, nah, everyone knows. Nah, you got to give it to them for free. They won't pay for anything. You got to give it to them free at the school and then get the parents to pay for it at home because the parents will pay for it. And could it be that if the schools start to take this seriously and suddenly the schools are like, well, we have to have this stuff in the schools, does this now make a market where we can actually have meaningful, sustainable content?
Yeah, we were kind of having a discussion about this. I love that vision, and I want that to happen. And yes, absolutely, all the things. Would it be great to get K-12 to get more involved in purchasing, compelling, engaging educational content, i.e. games? I'm all for it. It's difficult. I think in the context of AI, one of the things we talked about, which was an interesting conversation, was whether it would be interesting to train an LLM on material that you knew was approved to be used in school, so that there's somebody who creates a school-specific LLM, and that then districts and superintendents and things feel comfortable letting their students use that. Like who would that be? Who would do it? Would it be like a Wikimedia or a foundation? I don't know. But
it's so weird. I imagine a whole business where we're customizing it for your school, and its form will be the mascot of your school. Is now that I
like that. And if it's in Louisiana, it could teach you the 10 Commandments.
Oh, okay.
No.
Wow.
I hope it gets them wrong. I don't know.
There's the 11 Commandments.
Wow. Yeah, it starts hallucinating commandments.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's just what we need. All right, well, okay, so a lot of good questions here. So let's see what folks are asking from the audience here. Let's see if we got anything good here. Taking a quick look. Let's see. All right.
Donation request.
While you're doing that, Jesse.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I gotta say, we're talking about AI making a programmer's job easier, or maybe enabling us to skin things in multiple ways, or just make the production process easier. I would love to see that every kid could make a game about the thing they're learning about. To me, understanding on a systemic and game-based level, how something works, right? And being able to do that, I think could be really great.
Well,
so
and this,
I want to see us go out of business here in the game and education space, and hopefully have games be easier to make and accessible to kids.
well, so this is a great and related question. Someone talking about, hey, look, I work in the board game space, and right now, when you ask ChatGPT to generate a rule set for a board game, it tends to be pretty bad. And do you think that AI will get to the point that it can competently design a game, or is there something about game rules, et cetera, that just that's going to be hard to do, and it's necessary for humans to be in the loop? How do people feel about that?
I think it can learn eventually. I was talking about, there was something I read recently about someone writing using ChatGPT and then saying, okay, using it as a helper and asking, I need a citation for this, like an APA style, article that would back up the claim. And the AI went and put the citation and put it in the reference list, but the article doesn't exist. It's just, it made it up, but it knows what a citation is. It just doesn't know that it has to exist in the
Right.
peer-reviewed literature.
I've had students do that too, so I know I've seen that happen.
Telltale sign.
I think it's halfway through understanding what that means. It's learned what it looks like, and eventually I think it could learn. So I think in terms of making rules for a game, it could go the same way.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine that. Okay, because coming up with rules is one thing, but then what do we all do? We play test. Theoretically, the AI could play test games way faster than we could. So it could come up with rules and then go through 1,000 evolutions. It's possible, but I don't know.
You don't have a reward function for fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is fun or not, but if you can figure out some feature of games that tends to lead to fun, maybe you can quantify that.
Oh man, yes, right. So there's the quantification of fun, right?
That sounds fun.
It's your next book.
Yikes.
It's fun for the AI.
That is a huge part of this question. I think that we'll all be looking at. A number of questions have come in. People asking about what are the most likely ethical issues that we're going to face in this particular space of AI education in games. What are the ones that we really are going to have to address head on in order for this to be viable?
I think a lot of people are aware of ethical issues, the data by which these systems are trained, being, sort of hoovered up from the internet, replicating all those things that the internet does. But I think the thing that's happening right now is just, we've got to figure out a sustainable energy source, like the sun, or to use solar.
Right. So this technology presently uses a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so either we need to get better at energy, or we need these things to be way more efficient. So that sounds so the energy use, that obviously if people are using this every time you're going to do 3 hours of homework, this thing's here with you. Oh my God, the energy usage is going to be
You won't be able to survive on this planet. You'll be able to solve your trig problem, but it's too hot.
Right. No, that's definitely a good point. Yeah, the energy usage is a huge one that we would need to solve. Let's see. There's a couple other really smart ones here. One that always comes up anytime there's a new technology is the question of accessibility. Mm-hmm. Certainly when the internet first appeared and, oh wait, can we have this stuff on the internet? Because who can get access? Gradually we're to the point where access is getting near universal on the internet. Is that the case here? Is accessibility going to be is that a thing we're going to need to worry about, or how do people feel about that?
Yeah, that's a thing we always need to worry about. But I understand the impulse of a technologist to make a version for the majority of people rapidly. As a technologist, it's like, I'm going to make it for myself or whatever, right? But that's not where you stop. Accessibility is vital. There are some interesting things we've seen people use LLMs for on the accessibility front. Just a simple example is the alt text for pictures. Now that it can see pictures, it's super easy to just generate alt text so that anybody who's got a screen reader now knows what all your images are.
Right.
It might be putting alt text writers out of business.
Gotcha.
So
it's interesting, right? So there's the question of, hey, can I get accessibility to the AI? But if you can, the accessibility that it affords for people who, people who are differently abled or even different learning styles, that accessibility potentially opens
the transcriptions of audio that it does really readily into text is another example. So I feel like I skipped over the thing that's important, which is I think right now one of the things that's important is making sure people have access to these tools. So I know that there is an effort at the federal level, and I just keep forgetting the name of it. I keep wanting to call it the NAIRR, National AI R Resource. I don't know.
Sounds plausible.
Yes, making it up. The intent is to have a fund that allows people who can't afford to use LLMs to use the LLMs. It's charged against this fund so that it's accessible to people. It's not just accessible to people who can afford to pay, who are rich, whatever. So look that up. Correct me if that's not the name of it. Tell me what's the right name. But I love that. It's a great effort.
It is a sort of a grim future to imagine where they're going to be like super lush, if only the rich people can afford the super genius digital tutors, and the folks who can't afford that have these tutors that just are not very good, and that's a terrible, grim situation. That we need to figure out how. It seems like it's going to be important to figure out how to make that work. Because I know there's so much talk in the entertainment game space right now of the ongoing cost of using LLMs makes entertainment games not tenable at present. And so there's a lot of talk of like, well, yeah, that's all expensive cloud computing, but what if you made it slim enough it could all fit in your device because it's focused on just what you care about? Because your math tutor doesn't need to know everything. It just needs to know about math, right? And so you could make it small enough to kind of fit in your device, but
solving the energy problem.
Right. That solves the energy problem, adds for accessibility, but how fast? Yeah.
I think there's also that interesting idea of neurodiversity and like AI interacting with people who are differently able in that capacity. And I'm very curious to see how that evolves and how I think there's potential for AI to help in that sense, but it could also be that there's a lot of AI interactions that are targeted at a general audience and don't take those diverse populations into account. So something else to think about.
That's a good point, because there's a diversity of kinds of diversity, and we got to find ways to deal with them all.
I don't know. I don't like the way this conversation is going in a certain way, because as an educator of designers, I really want my students to learn to empathize with different perspectives and experiences.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if the AI does it, will we not have to? I don't know. That worries me a little bit. I mean, I do think it's important to continue to ask, what are we gaining, and then also what might we be losing in the process.
Yeah, boy, if the social media is creating bubbles now, imagine if everyone has this private bubble that is just all about, no, here's what you are. I mean, on some levels, part of that's exciting, right? Like, hey kid, I see you're really into unicorns. Welcome to unicorn math. We're doing it, right? But somebody else is getting baseball math, and somebody else is getting gymnastics math, whatever, right? And that's exciting, but on the other hand,
We're having this conversation about kind of majoritarian outputs of LLMs, and I think about unicorn math, and I'm like, if the LLM has trawled the internet and what it's found, every time it's found math, has found unicorns, then everybody who queries the LLM is always going to get unicorn math. But if you don't care about unicorns, this thing's not serving you. And this, unicorn math is a simple, easy example. But if the internet is trained on faction of politics you don't agree with, and it's going to give you all those replies back on that faction, that's a problem. Because the LLMs, they're majoritarian. It's like, this is the thing I saw the most, I'm going to give you that as a reply. So that seems bad.
So I think the capacity of the AI to be, to take into account those diversity things comes from our ability to address them, because the AI learns from what we do or we teach, right? It's not just a black box. We tell it, be sensitive to neurodiversity, and it will do it. We need to give it material to train it on. So I think it's we have to do it first.
I feel a little better about that then, maybe.
Yeah.
I just don't want us to push an empathy button and not have to empathize.
Yeah, and I mean, for all the dangers and concerns here, one of the things that I know you'd mentioned earlier, Sylvia, was how we're presently so dependent on testing in our educational systems. Do you have thoughts about how this might start to change that?
You mean assessment?
Assessment, yeah.
I think even independent from AI, games have huge potential to serve as a much more natural context for assessment than taking a test that I think is more taxing on students. And how can AI help that? I think that's still to be seen, but I think it has potential to predict. Like, we have done experiments at PBS Kids where we looked at gameplay data and tried to predict preschoolers' performance on the TEMA 3, which is a math assessment. And it did pretty well. It wasn't perfect, 100%, but it did pretty well. So what kids do in games, I think, can serve as assessments, even regardless of AI. But I think AI can help us see patterns and help kids improve even more.
Yeah, and just for all, obviously we have a lot of concerns about if what the AI is bringing is not connected to reality, is not authentic, and it's not really coming from a person, is this authentic education? But then at the same time, this notion of is what we have now authentic? When you're teaching to the test, how authentic is that? If we can move to a situation where what's being evaluated, not this one moment in time, but watching the entire trajectory of the student and what they're learning, it's a beautiful dream that this could create a much more authentic assessment of what someone's really learned.
Yeah, I think it would give teachers and humans way more information to work with and more time to focus on the student holistically.
Yeah, no, that's that's what just makes all this so challenging. Okay, so we've gotten a lot of fantastic questions in here, but I know we're coming up on time. I wanted to close out with something that had come up in our conversation a little bit, talking about sort of so many people are concerned about AI, and they should be. There's a lot of things that could go really wrong with it, and at the same time there's sort of enthusiasm about it. But generally, a lot of our conversations are people are like, no, that's going to be too dangerous, especially too dangerous for something as important as the education of children, and that there's the feeling of like, yeah, we should probably just hold that back. Let's see if we can legislate it away. And I was reminded of a quote from Fred Rogers, who talked about why he went into television. And he said, I went into television because I hated it so. And I thought there must be some way of using this fabulous instrument to nurture those who would watch and listen. And so it's an interesting thought. The idea, first of all, Fred Rogers hating something? Okay, all right, I guess so. He must have felt pretty strongly about it. So this question of, Fred Rogers found a way to use television, which had all these ethical problems, especially for children, found a way to make it this nurturing system. So let me ask, presumably out there in the world somewhere is the Fred Rogers of the 21st century, some young person who's going to hate this medium so much that they use it for good. What do you think the 21st century Fred Rogers, what is something you'd expect them to do? Colleen, what do you think?
Well, my favorite part of the Fred Rogers show is when he went to the sandbox. Just like, I don't even remember why. Like, I probably should have reviewed some Fred Rogers. I knew you were going to ask us about Fred Rogers. I just think of that, the sandbox. And to me, I guess what I would love to see is that these systems are able to meet us where we are and let us go somewhere where we wouldn't normally go. And intellectually, creatively, emotionally, I guess I wonder, just like a sandbox, how flexible these systems can be to let us imagine new ways of being and thinking.
That's great. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, when you read that quote, so I flash back, whenever anybody now says Mr. Rogers, I flash back to 1969 hearing in front of Congress where Mr. Rogers was trying to make his case for funding for his show. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Watch the YouTube video. Don't read the transcript because it'll ruin it for you. And so he says he hates TV, and he gets in front of Congress and he makes the best case I've ever seen for public funding for kids for educational content on television. And where I go, I still have a soft spot in my heart for policy, which is probably why this sticks. But what I wonder is, like, the Fred Rogers of today, like, who is going to do that for AI, for education for the kids? Like, what I see right now is all this legislation happening that's trying to reduce the functionality, restrict access, put barriers in place for use of AI. Who's the person who's going to say, what is this capable of, and how do we make it safe for kids to use it and benefit from it? So that's what I'm hoping for from a Fred Rogers.
Okay, Sylvia, can you give us the PBS perspective here? What do you think?
So if you think about Fred Rogers, and he hated TV in the 50s or 60s, and he found a way to do something good with it. When I started working at PBS Kids in 2000, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was still in production, and he was still alive. And Fred Rogers was excited to welcome kids to his internet neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And the team that I joined was working on this website for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I remember on a call, there being an illustration of the entrance to his house that had a white picket fence. and the fence had, pointy ends, and he looked at that and he said, that looks like something where someone could get hurt. Like, is it possible to round the tips of the fence? And of course, we did, or the designer did. And I think that's just an example of how he saw, he looked for ways to welcome children into this world that was being created with this technology in a way that made them feel loved and safe. And that's what I hope the Fred Rogers of the 21st century will have in mind when they think about how to use AI for the greater good.
Well, I can't imagine a better way to go out than that. Thank you very much,
Awesome.
and thank you for your question.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, everybody.
Hello. I hope everyone enjoyed that session. I feel the rock star panelists, absolutely amazing. We're going to get settled down and go into an equally exciting conversation. We're so pleased to have with us today a dear friend of Games for Change, Casey Baltas, who is the vice president at Tribeca Festival, and she runs the Games and Immersive section. I think it's really quite special that Tribeca has embraced games and immersive media over the last several years, and they did something very daring this past year about how they shared and showed immersive content. So Casey's going to be having a conversation with one of our curators, Chris Severson, who is also founder of GamePlan, a consultancy that works with XR companies. So please welcome to the stage Casey and Chris.
Ready? I am. Thanks everyone for coming. This is a real treat for me to talk with Casey today. I don't know how many of you were lucky enough to go to Tribeca earlier in the year, earlier this month. But as Susanna alluded to, Tribeca took quite a pivot this year in their immersive exhibition. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and get a behind-the-scenes gestalt on how this all came about. So I want to properly give you the background of Casey because it's quite illustrious and impressive. Casey has spearheaded many initiatives during her 17 years at Tribeca, including integrating video games and overseeing the birth of immersive programming at the festival in 2013, which was then called Storyscapes. And this year, she has been integral to the thought process and ideation behind the shift in direction for Tribeca's immersive programming. So in years past, Tribeca had, gosh, I'm going to say traditional VR, which sounds crazy to say anything in that reference of VR as traditional, but solo experiences. And this year, they pivoted to, I love this phrase, social digital theater, consisting of large-scale experiences. So Casey, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the programming this year.
Yes. This year, our immersive offering is being exhibited at a space called Mercer Labs Museum of Art and Technology. It's right across, it's the old Century 21, for some of you New Yorkers, right across from the Oculus. It's a newly opened space. I believe they opened their doors in around March. So we are one of their first, if not the first, guest exhibition within that space. It is really incredible space. And the reason I talk about this space, and I will talk about the space so much, is that it is actually the canvas for the work. So the two are intertwined. So it's very difficult to think about this exhibition, there's a little bit of show and tell here on the screen, without actually thinking about what the space is and what it can do. So it really has some of the most highest quality projection and audio and technical capabilities that are in New York City and perhaps around the world. And it's led by artist and co-founder Roy Nachum. So there are 15 rooms in this space, occupying 3 floors. And for Tribeca's exhibition, we took over 5 of those spaces with 8 works by 6 artists. So you can see the programming on daily rotation with a different theme every day. So if you come in this space here, which you're seeing on the screen, is on one day. And then if you come another day, we have another artist playing. So some of the rooms include like a 4D audio room, an 8K floor-to-ceiling projection room, mirrored infinity rooms, and many others. And really the idea was to custom curate, commission, and design works of art that had previously existed in the world, either in VR or some other form, but design a new version of it specifically for the rooms within at Mercer. And it's the first time Tribeca has actually ever collaborated with a space or another person for our immersive programming.
Well, I'd love to hear how this all came about and specifically the decision to pivot in this way. Why was this a new approach and you felt it was needed?
Yeah. I mean, the immersive section at Tribeca is very unique in that we have to think not only about what projects exist in the world and are ready to be premiered, but we also have to really survey the landscape of where we are technologically, where the immersive industry is, and where artists are and what their needs are and what they're potentially creating for. So in that process every year, what we're seeing is that the word immersive is covering a much wider umbrella, from live performing arts now to spatial audio, as well as digital art, world building, VR, AR, all the realities, et cetera. And it was an opportunity, we've had this thought and this idea to want to explore new formats. And the sort of LBEs is what they're called, the location-based experiences, are becoming fairly predominant in the space. And we wanted to see if there was an opportunity to produce something on that scale. And we were always limited by resources and space, because it's very hard to replicate a space like that for 12 days of a festival in a space that just isn't equipped. So when Mercer opened and when we found them, it was a sort of a strike while the iron is hot moment for sure for us, in that we wanted to really take advantage of that opportunity and the freshness of the space, as well as where we see not the landscape going, but at least growing, to think through opportunities for traditional VR artists or artists within the digital space to think on a grander, physical, larger scale, to hopefully provide opportunities that would exist in the future, either for a Mercer or for the Sphere or for the COSM venues, which are just now opening in LA this weekend and will exist in the United States. So having that opportunity is why we sort of made the move this year.
And making that shift in focus, how does that sort of lead you to look at like future reasonings for like what you'll do with the festival going forward?
You know, it allows us to experiment and explore. And anytime we do that, we do something new, we learn from it. So it doesn't necessarily mean a shift away. It means an addition to. Resources and budgets and bandwidths, excluded, the appetite to be able to broaden the scope of what immersive can be, both to artists, to audiences, and also how immersive projects and digital artists and video games as well, how they can actually influence the fabric of what a festival is, because the inherent nature of a festival is social, it's connection. You go to a conference, you go to Games for Change, you go to Tribeca to discover and to connect. And doing that through new technology and new opportunities on a large scale is something that we embrace.
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you think the audience responded to this new pivot? Because I know in film festivals past, there's like a very privileged few who get to go to a film festival, first of all, and then it's an even smaller niche of people who get time in the headset, and they've signed up in time, and it all works out. And so there are a few people that you get to talk with about what you experience, but this is a whole different, like I said earlier, I love that phrase, social digital theater. So what do you think your audience, how did they respond? Were they surprised by the installation? Were they happy of what the work that you presented? Were they missing VR? What's your thoughts about that?
I think all of the above. I mean, in transparency, we are 1 week out of the festival, so we are still processing and gathering feedback and data on how the festival went, as well as this experience. So I can only sort of think through it in anecdotal and sort of observational terms, if you will. What we have, the biggest benefit of producing something at this scale is that the throughput is much, much more. So when we produced immersive programming in the past, we are limited by the number of devices, headsets, equipment per person that comes into the room. So the size of the space isn't actually the challenge. It's the actual sort of number of equipment and what it takes to run. So in theory, in previous years, the maximum throughput for immersive could have been 4,000 for over 12 days. This year, it can be 4,000 in a day and a half or 2 days. Wow. So the space is quite large and can accommodate, especially this room, which is what they call the MAP or the main hall, can accommodate a collective viewing experience of works of around 200 to people at a time. And for us, that is really, really beneficial. And additionally, we're seeing new audiences that have never either experienced digital artwork, immersive work, or come to Tribeca, because Mercer is located in a major thoroughfare. So the mix and the range of audience touching work that they may not have seen or discovered before is much wider, from kids to elderly, tourists, immersive industry, cultural museums. It really runs the gamut. And I think you're seeing sort of an observational behavior change within a space like this. More often than not, large-scale experiences are about taking pictures of yourself in them versus looking at the work. And the sort of amount of time you spend in a space is much shorter, because the sort of consumption, if you will, is brief, if you will.
Right.
So we're seeing people sit in these rooms for 20 to 30 minutes to just watch and absorb the work as is intended to be, as works of art or pieces that tell stories.
You mentioned just the kind of the broader demographic interest and the more accessibility. Do you think people are still somewhat intimidated to put a VR headset on for the first time, like a Tribeca attendee, and this just is like something, oh, I can walk into this room and it's just easier for someone to go into that kind of space and accept it?
Exactly. I think it's any barrier to entry, both in the immersive space and in the video game space, means an audience lost or a person not engaging. So the more you can strip away any barrier to entry, the more people and the wider range of audiences get to experience something
Right.
new.
What happens next year? Is there space to do both this larger scale installation and VR experiences? What's the thought process behind that for Tribeca?
I'll say this year, so far, it leaves more questions than answers. And it is something that we will be thinking through over the course of the summer, going into producing the next edition of the festival. I think, like I said before, this is hopefully in addition to, not in lieu of, resources. Producing a festival is hard. Games for Change, thank you for doing this. It is very difficult work because of all the moving parts. So more often than not, you're limited by the ability to produce versus the ambition or the interest to include all forms of immersive work. So there is a world, and I actually think it's a complementary world, where you can have large-scale experiences and also have headset-based experiences and also have augmented reality experiences inside and outside. Really the goal, I think, because we live in a festival, is to not just think about immersive or video games as digital only.
Right.
It's how does the digital touch the physical? How does the digital enhance the connection between either the audience and the artist or audiences with each other? So that, to me, will be the guiding principle to whatever we produce in the future. And the idea that traditionally in past festivals have the word immersive is synonymous with VR is
Right.
not necessarily the case anymore, or ever. As you mentioned, I've been with the festival for 17 years, seen it evolve. The first iteration of immersive programming was a transmedia program that had a few VR pieces, but a wide range of formats. So the format exploration is actually at the heart of what immersive should be and can be to artists who are interested in not being singularly focused on one format, but want to understand and see how their work can be translated in many ways, 2D, 3D, digital, physical, all the things.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think your point about, revisiting the definition of what immersive is really important right now. And I love the idea of immersive melding in the real physical world, and that's part of the excitement we've had about AR in the past too. This is a question that I don't have listed on our pre-program. Who do you, like for the artists that did the installation, what were their disciplines? Where were they coming from? Were they VR people who were adapting to this larger install? Was it from other traditional art venues that you saw this work coming from?
Yep, a little bit of both. We, because of the sort of shortened timeline, we wanted to pay homage to the work that had been done in the immersive space through Tribeca over the course of the years. So we did look at our base of alum and tapped a few of them to return with works that had previously been in VR to adapt them for the large scale. The image that you saw prior to this one here with the circular screen, that work was a piece called Limbotopia that was a VR piece that premiered at Tribeca 2 years ago. And the work that exists in Mercer now is a full reinterpretation with a new name, inspired by Limbotopia, but a continuation of. So providing the artist the ability to extend the message, the story, and or reformat was a goal of ours. As well, bringing really incredible digital native artists to the table to come and produce on this scale. For instance, this piece here, it's called The Great Endeavor. It's a film, and to see each day that room is trying to demonstrate something different. It's trying to say to you, one, these spaces should be malleable, and you should not necessarily think of them as one thing. They can actually host a great number of works. And this piece is almost cinema as on large scale. And this is a piece by Memo Acton, a very brilliant digital artist using generative AI and live motion capture dancer to create this piece. And to me, this is the sort of a spectacular display of the fine digital art that exists in the world today.
As great as these images look, I'm sure they don't do it justice, even a tenth. So I am going to go on Saturday to Mercer Labs. It is still open and there are still tickets, so you can go online. It runs through July 29th, I believe, which is another great thing, I think, for the festival, is that this can live beyond and an audience can see it, for weeks afterwards. So I hope all of you go. I'll be there on Saturday. Maybe I'll run into some of you. Casey, this was really interesting. I'm a VR purist, or have been, but I'm expanding my mind, and I really love the fact that you've done this, and I can't wait to go check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, be honest with me.
My ult's ready.
Do you know what rape feels like?
No, I don't actually.
Well, do you want to know?
Are you saying you're gonna rape me?
Because you're heading on the right path right now.
Are you saying you're gonna rape me?
You're going on the right path for it.
Is that what you're saying?
It's not rape if I like it. Is it now? Hectic, oh.
So the reason I play that is, as I mentioned, to give you a sense of what it feels like when these actions are normalized in gaming spaces. Now, as I mentioned, it is, gaming cultures, and gaming cultures is not limited just to in-game experiences. It is also related in the ecosystem of games and game-adjacent spaces. It is an ecosystem issue. So here's another example. If you're at GDC, you may have seen me talk about this because it was very fresh. In February 2024, an employee of Sweet Baby Inc., which is a narrative design consulting company, found a Steam group that was listing all of the games they had consulted on, and essentially the group said, don't play any of these games, they're pushing a woke agenda, we don't want anything to do with that. The employee then reported this group to Steam and said, hey, this is against the terms of service, and what proceeded was a targeted harassment campaign towards the employee, towards all the employees of Sweet Baby Inc., towards all of the people who had worked with the employees of Sweet Baby Inc. This right here is an image from Melissa Mercante from Kotaku. She wrote a piece saying, guys, Sweet Baby Inc. doesn't even do what you think it does. Like, narrative consultants are not pushing any agenda. They're coming in, when the drywall's already been set and they're just tweaking things or whatever. And her even saying that made her the target of harassment, which she is still the target of a lot of incessant harassment since February 2024. Then anybody who even commented on her post became a target. It's an ecosystem, right? It just expands. And I want to give you an example of something somebody had posted in response to Alyssa's tweet. It says, the sexual violence in my mentions just because I responded to Alyssa's tweet is both familiar and unsettling. Pay attention and speak up against the targeted harassment of your colleagues. Refuse to normalize this. Which again gets to this idea of normalization, this idea that these sentiments are normalized. But the other thing I think is interesting about this response is how she says it's familiar, because it is familiar, because we've been experiencing these same kinds of things since Gamergate of 2014. It's been 10 years since then. Keza McDonald wrote this piece a few weeks before everything happened with Sweet Baby Inc., looking back on how far the industry has come over the last 10 years since the events of Gamergate in 2014. And she was analyzing the industry's strategies to kind of combat this normalization, or perhaps the strategies that have not yet quite been established to really combat the situation. She says, when Gamergate was going on, the silence for much of the video game industry was deafening. Instead of standing up for the people who were being targeted, almost everyone who wasn't being directly attacked tried to pretend it wasn't happening. The games industry failure to speak out decisively did not calm the situation or dissuade the mob. It merely left people who in some cases were harassed out of their homes, out of their workplaces, feeling alone, furious, and often afraid. The normalization of hate, misogyny, racism, anti-LGBTQIA, white nationalism, this is all a problem. And the culture of silence around it is exacerbating the problem. And to be clear, being silent is a choice. Not making a choice is a choice. As put by a colleague of ours in the industry, shared with consent, had to lock my account again. I can't believe this shit is happening again. If you're a man in game dev, a great way to show support is not let leadership ignore it. The reality is harassment exists in the world. Misogyny is not a games problem. Like, misogyny exists out in the world. And I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is when it gets to this level, when people are being run out of their houses and homes, when people are coming to expect threats of sexual violence and being told even when they report it, oh, it's just gaming banter, you don't know what you're here for, this is a problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. And again, I don't have all the answers, but one thing I do know is being complacent is being complicit, both from the view of the person who is experiencing the harm and feeling unsupported, but also from the people who are perpetuating the harm. Because if nothing's being said, it's assumed that it's complicity, that it's fine, that it's normal, that I can behave this way. Now, we also know in research that users adjust to the norms of their space. We were talking about that actually in the Discord tabletops earlier, that you adjust to the norms of your space. So what norms have we set that the expectation now is that this is what we're going to expect, and this is what we're going to see when we go into gaming spaces? Now, before I give you my strategies and my spiel about loud, clear, and public advocacy, I want to also acknowledge there are a lot of things that took us down this road. There's a lot of things that brought us here. Studio culture, history of misogyny in society, technical challenges with moderation. Sometimes there's a lack of prioritization for player safety. You can talk about the online disinhibition effect. People just like to be jerks on the internet. And all of these things are important, and all of these things can be talked about and addressed. But the reason I'm here to talk about advocacy today is because I think it is the greatest catalyst for cultural change. If you start about loud, clear, and public advocacy, you get the conversation started, you get the change moving. But we also have to talk about these other things. It's not just a one note, one thing, and it fixes it all. Okay, so here are the strategies I'm suggesting with advocacy. Bottom up and top down, or player-led and industry-led. There we go. Player-led, see something, say something. And before I go into this a little bit, I want to say there is a lot of efforts happening from bottom-up strategies and player-led. And originally I wrote the talk to just talk about top-down from the industry, but I realized that we're not at 100%, right? We still have a lot of ways to go with like bystander effects and people standing up for other people in their community. So I thought it was worthwhile to just reiterate the point that research has found the best way to stop these behaviors in the moment is someone of a similar social status to actually stand up in the moment and be like, hey, that's not cool. So in that video example, if there was another male voice, another person in that same kind of social status that, hey, that's actually revolting, the things that you're saying here, that is most likely to extinguish the behavior in the moment. Then of course you report, and of course you do all those other formal channels of escalation. Now, for industry-led strategies, I want to remind everyone we're talking about culture change. So we have tools, we have moderation tools that people in leadership in the industry have created. Report, ignore, and block. Report, block, and mute, I guess is what it should say. And the bottom are kind of player-led strategies that have kind of come in to fill in the blanks. Now, all of these options are an important piece of the moderation puzzle, but they don't change the culture. Actually, Constance Steinkuhler was on the Games for Change stage last year talking about how these all happen after the harm has occurred, and it doesn't do anything to alert the people around you that something here is happening that's not okay. Mute doesn't alert other people around you there's a bad actor. Whisper networks are only good for your networks. Reporting and blocking are punitive actions that happen after the harm has happened. And again, in the example we saw, even if you do report, in that one case, it wasn't actioned. So when it comes to industry, how do we change culture? How do we move just beyond these proactive and reactive tools, and how do we start catalyzing change in culture? And it's literally just say something. We see it, we know it's there, it's literally just say something. Like Keza McDonald said in the Guardian article, we change gaming culture by having leadership, the loudest voices in the room, set the behavioral norms. Now, here's one example of saying something that is loud, clear, and public. Bungie took to court a member of their community who was harassing one of their developers, and they won. I'm not saying sue everyone, but I am saying this is a loud, clear, and public stance from leadership about what is and what is not allowed on their platform. It's also a great example of kind of a reassessed strategy coming from the top. Got a call out riot also in May 2024. I don't know if it was in response to that particular video because that was Valorant, but there were some other conversations at the time about harassment in online gaming spaces. They came out with this statement. It went viral on Twitter. And what I really loved about this statement was that they literally were like, hey, if you're going to be a jerk, don't play here. Like, go somewhere else, which is really loud, clear, and public. This is what we want, and this is what we don't want. The mute button is not there for you to be a jerk. They actually say that in the video, which I thought was really great. And I give these two examples as examples of we're getting there, we're moving forward. We get the memo of how powerful this can be, but there's still a long way to go. I would love to see this industry-wide. I would love to see this come proactively from studios, not after harm has happened, but getting in front of it. And I would love to see a cohesive message kind of across the industry as a whole. The other thing to note too is they talked about new policy in this video. And while advocacy is a great first step for catalyzing change, it obviously has to be supported by policy change. So I'm really interested to see, particularly in this case with Valorant, about how the new policy moves them in the right direction and starts to shift that culture. So essentially, I'm calling for a hard reset, like pull out the cartridge, blow into it, put it back in, right? That fixes everything. And it's nothing that we can't fix because we're the games industry. And I use this all the time because games make fantasies our realities. Like we're the biggest media industry in the world. We have all the best creative minds in the room. Like there's nothing we can't do. If we band together, we can all agree that these kinds of behaviors are not acceptable in our play spaces. So how can we change the norms that have been embedded in these spaces? So I'm gonna leave you with a resource. This is for everyone, but especially for leadership. My colleague and I, Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer, we wrote this to empower the industry to take these steps to make change. To be fair, in 2014, there were a lot of unknowns. Not making a statement about Gamergate could have come out because nobody knew what to do, right? But we know now that silence doesn't help the situation, silence exacerbates the situation. So let this be a tool to empower you, pass it up to leadership, to empower leadership about how you can take those first steps in culture change and moving beyond the implied complicity. And then I'm going to leave you with just some words from my colleague. It says, sometimes I wonder if being in the industry is worth it. Between the layoffs, conspiracies, and the amount of hate, it takes a toll on you. No matter how hard you try to protect yourself, it hits. We should not expect these kind of behaviors in our play spaces, and we do have the power to change it. Thank you.